Learn how to create this gorgeous, very trendy wedding table centre, then keep watching today's video for a full step-by-step tutorial. Welcome back to another tutorial. It's fantastic as always to be back. Now you might have seen me arrange some flowers in this gorgeous golden urn. I think I've used it a couple of times in previous videos and I can always link it here for you. You can pop back and have a look. I've gone and invested in a slightly larger version because I've got quite a lot of weddings this summer which need to have a bigger container. So this is going to work really well for today's design. And I'm almost going to do that design style that I did a couple of weeks ago where I had a lot of massed flowers at the base. I know I used some peonies and I had lots of upright placements of flowers that almost gave that translucent effect through the middle. And it is a design style that's really quite popular for weddings for 2023 and probably into 2025 as well. And it's a design style that I love, but I'm not quite sure about the use of expensive flowers at the base to cover your mechanics. Now, when I did it before, I did it in a glass container with a block of floral foam. This time I'm going to use the wire netting, so I'm not going to be able to get such formal placements of flowers. It's going to be a little looser and not quite as vertical as the design before. But I don't get a huge amount of comments, but there are a lot of people that don't like me using floral foam here on the channel, even though it is still used massively in the industry. There are loads of problems with single-use plastics, flowers being flown in from all around the world, and even though I've reduced the amount of floral foam I use here, which is really important, it's still massively used in the industry. And there are lots of designs that it's almost impossible to create without floral foam due to the location, time of the wedding, the design style itself. So floral foam, unfortunately, until there is a much better substitute, is still used a lot in the industry. So I'm going to go this time with some wire netting. Wire netting isn't a style that everybody likes. Lots of people are still very fixed on rigid formal patterns that we've seen over the years. But it's nice to see a variety, whether it is wire netting or whether it is different types of floral foam. And you will find lots of videos here on the channel where I've used fibre flora or I've used agri-wool. So you can always go back and take inspiration from those. So the important information that needs to be told when you're using wire netting is that the hole in the wire netting needs to be suitable for the size of flowers that you're using. So if you're using big garden greenery, big branches, big maybe tropical statement flowers, then you need to have a wider hole in your wire netting. If you're using standard flowers like I've got today, then this one is good. It's about 1 inch in diameter where the whole sections are. And if you're using very fine material, then you might want to go a little smaller with the gaps. What you will find is that the flowers will move around quite freely in the larger gaps and not necessarily hold your flowers in the position that you want them to go. Now, another important tip is that you really need to have several layers. It's no good having a flat piece of wire netting. That won't do anything to support your flowers. Your flowers will just nod around and fall about within the design. So several layers. I normally layer mine into 3, squidge it together and then place it in the container. Now for today's video, I want the wire netting quite low because I don't want this visible and I don't want to have the problem at the end of lots of the wire netting showing. So I'm going to push it down and hopefully when we look at it from the side, you can't see it. If you're doing a bigger, grander design and you maybe have more foliages, I'm limited today with the choice of foliage that I've got. It's very minimalistic today. If you have lots of greenery and you want to make a bigger design, then you can raise your wire netting higher. You can use a combination of the two, floral foam in the base to give you more support and wire netting on the top. Lots of different versions. Remember, my way isn't the only way. Lots of people will teach you different styles and different techniques. I'm going to go over the top in the middle in a minute with some floral tape. but I'm going to get the water in first. If you're using just wire netting and water, make sure the water level is high and you can top it up throughout the next week or so to keep your flowers nice and fresh. If I was doing this for a wedding table centre, I would put an insert into there so that my guests, my bridal party could take the flowers out and take them home and leave me with this fabulous gold container. Right, let's get that tape across the top, and I'm going to do this just, I'm going to do this just from left to right as you're looking at it. You could cross it if you want, but I think that's going to be adequate for the selection of flowers that I've got. Now I can't tilt that forward because I've already filled it with water, but I can bring in another shot, another angle of the design for you to see. Now my first flower placement is going to be hydrangeas, and hydrangeas at this time of the year, so we're in early June at the moment, are going to be quite expensive to buy. So if you're not a florist like I am and you haven't got hold of hydrangeas this time of year, think of a large flower. And I'm going to cut that a bit shorter. It could be carnations grouped together. You can, of course, use greenery, but the style that I'm doing today doesn't have foliage in it. And I'm going to mass together, so group together, 3 hydrangeas there at the base. They're quite small hydrangeas, but they're going to work really nicely in this arrangement. So they're short, and they're used really in this arrangement to cover the wire netting and to give me some base weight. There's a good chance that when this design is finished, they'll almost have disappeared. And this is what I struggle with this type of design, is that you're using quite expensive flowers, almost like you would greenery, to cover your mechanics. But you're going to see this in a wide range of places. It's really quite popular. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of the roses. Now this one is Alchemy, and it is a really pretty rose. I've probably used this before. It's a really delightful shade of peach, and as it opens there's a slightly darker centre to it. But what I'm going to do is reflex a few of the roses so that they're more open, and to do this you just need to use your finger and your thumb to bend the petals back. You need to do this when the rose is a couple of days old. You won't be able to do it with a fresh rose because it hasn't had a chance to open, and all you will do is bruise the petals as you're trying to bend them backwards. So if you do want to do this reflexing technique, you have to get your roses in a little earlier than normal. And I didn't really have a set pattern in mind for this arrangement before I started, but it almost looks like I've gone with a set of 3. And what I don't want to do is place these at the same level. So this one is slightly higher. It's not hugely higher, but it is a little higher. And I'm removing nearly all of the greenery. This is a round arrangement, so it's for the centre of the table. And I did mention when I did this before that when I did my training, it was reinforced that we don't block the view between the guests sitting on the table, but nobody seems to follow that anymore. It's do what you want now, not do what you should do. So look at that, isn't that just wonderful? And you can do this with a supermarket rose. Alchemy is a florist grade rose, so it's quite an expensive rose, but look at that. I got a lovely round shape, bit of tape that I'm going to have to work on covering there, but a really lovely round shape. And if you're doing this at home and it's just for a hobby, then you don't have to worry about the tape at all. The tape is mainly there to make it easier to transport and for the whole design not to fall apart. So you can decide whether or not you want to do that yourself. Now I am thinking, should I have put another hydrangea there in at the base? I might regret my decision at the end not to do it because I do have a little bit of a gap there in the middle. I'm not quite sure if we can pick up on that without the water coming out. But we'll just progress on for a minute and see how the design comes together. Now, one of the other reasons that I've put it's not greenery, that I've put flowers at the base is that now when I start feeding in the taller flowers, I've got a structure that's going to hold it into place. Sometimes when you try and put in upright flowers and there's no base structure, the flower flops around and moves around quite a lot. So it almost acts as like a support network for the flowers. Now we're coming, as I said, into the summer, and I'm starting to get flowers in the garden. So the astilbe has come from my garden. So I've got a bit of a combination of flowers from my garden, flowers from the florist supplies, which I've used so far. And I've only picked myself 3 of the astilbe. There's still a lot left to cut. But what I'm going to aim to do is to go slightly taller on, or slightly thicker maybe on one side. We'll just see how it comes together. So I would describe this, I think, as a semi-crescent, because it does come down and there's a gap in the middle and it goes up the other side, but it's maybe not as clear as designs that I've done before. And with this second, or maybe the third piece, I'm going to go even taller. So we're going to bring it up in that sort of position there, trying to leave a bit of a gap in the centre. And I'm going to hang on to the astilbe leaves. I don't think I'm going to use them because they're quite short, but they might go in something else I'm doing because it's quite a light, airy foliage that can work quite well. Let's get rid of that water before I move on any further. So we're going peaches and creams today, and I've got a slight little bit of lemon to go in with it as well. I've used all the heavyweight flowers at the bottom. I am going to add in some roses in a moment, but the softer, more delicate flowers are going to give me the height in this arrangement. And that will hopefully avoid that inability to see across the table. But nobody else seems to mind, so I'm not going to mind either. Now, the flower that I'm going to use next is this gorgeous, everything's gorgeous, isn't it? Gorgeous and fabulous, they're my 2 favourite words. So in my garden at the moment, I have this lovely variety of scabious. It's a delightfully yellow shade, and it's almost about 5 foot in my garden. It's absolutely wonderful to use, and it's going to go so nicely with the creams in this arrangement, and it's going to add that lovely summer look to it. And I don't want to face it in any particular way. This arrangement is all round, so I'm going to almost add it in so it's heading in towards the middle of the arrangement, rather than in that position where it's facing forward. Because when it's facing forward, it's got that really obvious sort of dominant placement. See what happens? Now, this is common practice with wire netting. What I'm going to do is use the hydrangea head to support that flower head, and for the beginning of it they are going to swing around, but as I keep adding more flowers and I fill the arrangement out, hopefully it will stay in the position. So this one is going to have to be moved as I work along. So a fabulous flower. Now this has only been in my garden about 2 years. It's in the herbaceous section. I sound like I've got gardens like Blenheim Palace, but I do only have a little meagre garden. But it's one that grows in a little corner of the garden, and it comes up every year. It's easy to grow. Have a look out for it next time you're in the garden centre. And what I'm going to aim to do now is come up slightly higher with another one on this side here. So we're slightly lopsided, a little bit taller on one side, a little bit shorter on the other. Right. Stay there. It's not quite, it is going to move, and I'm not worried about it for a minute. I will fiddle around with them and get them into the position I want more towards the end. If I had added that hydrangea to the base there, I probably would have had some extra support. But what I'm going to do instead is open up another rose and get a rose there in the centre, because I can see quite a lot of that wire netting. And if you're new to this industry, your mechanics are everything that you use to hold your design together. So floral tape, oasis, chicken wire, and all that should be invisible when you finish. You shouldn't be able to see any of your tape or your ugly bits and pieces that you've used to create your design. There's nothing worse than seeing a fabulous arrangement and you can still see all the tape. And I am guilty of it sometimes when I do tutorials because I can't quite see because the screen is far away. But we've got that lovely masked selection at the bottom. What I'm worried about at the moment is that it looks like two different designs. I've got peach and white at the bottom, yellow and cream at the top. What I now need to do is bring some of that peach up higher so that it looks a little bit more fluid and not quite so disjointed. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm also going to reflex one of them open. Now this is a strange colour one because it's almost like a mustard. It's not quite the same colour as that peach one, but that's going to work well up high. It's a nice small head and it can tuck in there. And now as I'm building up the layers, it's now more solid and a lot more structured. Now, sometime during the start of the video, I normally tell you to subscribe to the channel, and I forgot to do it this time. So welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Sharon. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so. It really does help to build this floral community, and it helps other people find these amazing tutorials. And if you haven't been here before, if you keep watching the video right to the very end, then there are close-ups of the individual flowers and you can have a look at the finished design in more detail. Right, so now we're adding in that height, and this is where that design slightly changes from previous arrangements. Normally we do smaller flowers up high, and what I'm doing is opening and reflexing these roses back so that now we have some big flowers up high, which you don't generally do in a traditional arrangement. You keep it to the smaller flowers, which you can see I already started to do because that's my natural way of creating designs. So let's get that next rose in, and I'm going to remove the greenery. Right, up nice and tall, nice big open roses. This design works beautifully well with all different types of flowers, whether they're wild flowers that you might have picked while you're out walking, or whether you've been to a local flower farm, or you've got flowers in the garden, or whether you're buying from the supermarket. You can create this delightful little arrangement quite easily, even if you haven't got the selection that I've got today. Now, I'm not using any foliage. Well, I'm going to add a little bit in at the end. I don't have a huge amount of foliage today, and I know many of you that watch the tutorials can't get hold of greenery. So I've tried to do a couple of designs recently where I'm not using a huge amount of foliage. Just move that little stilby slightly. So don't forget it's all round, so there needs to be interest on both sides. So I need really to bring another rose here so that there's some added interest for whoever is sitting on the opposite side of the table. We don't want to make this front facing. And if you do want to copy this style and you've got less flowers to use, I'm very lucky obviously because I've got wide choice here to use. If you want to do this in a smaller version, then you can do it front facing and don't worry about putting flowers at the back. But beautiful, really big roses and that lovely, lovely feel. Here I can see quite a large gap in between that hydrangea, so I'm going to do another rose. I'm going to reflex another one and then pop it in that gap. Now this reflexing method, I have mentioned this before, so if you're a regular visitor to the channel, you would have heard me say this before. Reflexing roses at the moment is a huge trend in wedding work. Brides are having it in bouquets, they're having it in table centres, but it's not a new technique. This has been around probably since the 90s. Well, I'm getting carried away now. Where's that hole that I wanted to fill? It's a technique that's been around for absolutely for ages, but it's just having a bit of a revival at the moment, and it's been seen in lots of wedding work and wedding bouquets. So if we look at it from the side, we've got that depth, we've got height, and then if we look at it from this side, we've got width. So hopefully I've created a good design. My next flower is possibly something that you've got grown in the garden. As a florist, I can buy it. This is a leucanthemum. It's tangled up with my eucalyptus. But you might also recognise it as being like a meadow or a wildflower that you might see growing in the hedgerows. I commonly know it as dog daisy or the ox-eye daisy, but it is one that as a florist we can buy. And surprisingly, it's quite a long-lasting little flower as long as it's been conditioned properly. And if you buy a packet of seeds and sprinkle it in your garden, then it will come back year after year because it self-seeds beautifully. And this is a commercially available one, but you could quite easily go out and pick it if you're out foraging one day, or at least you can in the area I'm in. And I'm going to do exactly the same, just add some extra height and then bring the colour down to the bottom so that we've got that daisy sort of effect right the way down there towards the bottom. Now I've had these in this week because I'm doing a beautiful wedding on the weekend and I'm going to be using it in the wedding. So I don't have a huge amount of them spare. I've just got a few that aren't going to be used, and I thought it would give that really light and airy look. And what's always beautiful about a more wild looking flower is that the heads aren't perfectly straight. They aren't perfectly matching. And it does bring that sort of really delightful, dainty look to your floral design. Last one for this side. I'm not sure if I said that the little ox-eye daisy was my last flower, but I do also have these spray roses, which are a sort of peachy champagne colour. And they've come in not the best condition. They were going to be used for some funeral work we were doing, but I think they've possibly been out of water for too long. And it's taken me a little while to get them rehydrated. But not to waste them, I'm going to use them in here instead. I've only got 3 stems. The rest didn't pass my inspection. But you can possibly see the greenery on it is really quite poor. And they've either been maybe in the wrong temperature in the delivery vehicle, or they've possibly been stuck somewhere for a couple of days. But I've had a credit for them, which is always good. And it's a lighter shade. It's not as dark as the rose at the base. And it's going to work quite well as my final flower before I put in some of the eucalyptus. Now this rose is going to benefit from having most of the greenery removed, because then the water is going to the flower head rather than to keeping the leaves alive. And what I'm also going to try to do, that was a bit long when I put it in there, is not have this one and this one on the same height, because it will almost give me like a visual line across the middle of the arrangement. And I think the last one I'm going to bring down quite low to sit on top of that quite heavy hydrangea there. And other than adding in some final small pieces of greenery, I think I'm really done with that one. Now this eucalyptus is a very strange shape. It's almost like a fountain, and it would have worked really well in a hand-tied bouquet, just sitting in the middle there. But what I'm going to use it for is to drape it over the edge of my container. It's going to work perfectly to hide that little bit of tape that I've got on the side. Now I could have used some trailing ivy there, or I could have gone in with a bigger flower, but I'm a little bit restricted today to having a huge amount of flower choice in this particular colour combination. So I'm going to make use, I'm not going to make use of that one because it is snapped, but I'm going to make use of these really beautiful shapes that are angled nicely to go over the edge of that container. And rather than just having 2 or 3 pieces sticking out on each side of the arrangement, I'm going to cut a few smaller pieces to work its way through the design as well. Just got to find where the tape is and a little piece in there. Rather than them looking like 2 wings sticking out on either side of the arrangement, which is a real no-no, I'm going to feed some little pieces through the centre to keep that colour, that nice grey colour going through the middle. Couple of pieces. I don't want to overfill now because I don't want to lose that really lovely shape that I've created. But we do need just a smaller bit to add in a bit of texture. Now I need to go quite steady at this point because I don't want to spoil it rather by going too traditional with it and putting in too many pieces of greenery. I do have quite a big gap here at the front, just underneath here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to angle this one forward. And that is a real good example of how versatile arranging flowers in chicken wire can be. You wouldn't have been able to do that in foam because you would have been left with a really large hole in the foam. But I can take out that little rose, move it along slightly to give me a bit of extra space there to put that greenery in, and I think that is just so fantastic. I am loving that. In a couple of weeks' time, I've got this going out to a wedding in I think it's burgundies and dark pinks. So that is going to look fantastic. But what do we think? Are we loving this new style? Do we dislike it? The more flowers you add in, the more you lose that base weight at the bottom, and the more you lose those hydrangeas or the peonies that you've got at the bottom. But this is definitely bang on trend at the moment. If you use Pinterest, take a look over there at the current trends for wedding floristry. And of course, let me know what you think. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it something that you would have a go at home? It does remind me very much of very opulent American movies when you see a wedding scene and they have these great big urns and compote bowls that they spread out in very luxurious and opulent weddings. Thank you as ever for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comment box. Let me know where you're watching from and what you enjoy most about this channel or what you would like to see more of. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost anything. Hit that notification button to be told every time I upload a new tutorial. And I look forward to seeing you for the next video. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.